So Garoppolo converts on third, and Trey Lance back in at quarterback.
That is one of the toughest things for a quarterback, I got to say. When you convert a first down and then in comes your replacement, you can't get into a rhythm.
Lance off the play fake, first pass, and it's a touchdown. Trent Sherfield on the receiving end of Trey Lance's first career NFL touchdown pass.
Now, back to Willard and Dibs on 95.7 The Game.
All right, that was from the NFL on Fox, and all over the NFL Network is Tom Pelissero, who we're not going to waste any time. Let's jump in with him right now here on Willard and Dibs, joining us live, and then we'll get back to your phone calls after the breaking news earlier today that Sam Darnold is going to be the firm QB2 for the 49ers, and the Niners will, quote, explore all options concerning Trey Lance, and then Trey was not at practice today. Tom Pelissero joins us now. Good afternoon, Tom. Thank you so much. How are you?
No problem, guys. What's going on?
Well, a lot, as you might expect. My first question would be, you mentioned that the 49ers are exploring all options with Trey Lance. What are some of those options?
Well, I think that the most logical option at this point would be finding a trade partner for Trey Lance. And there's a lot of different factors that go into this. But for Trey, everybody there in San Francisco in that 49ers organization, they like Trey, the person. They like, the work ethic, how he approaches things. He does pick things up quickly. It's just not come together the way that anybody there envisioned. And quite frankly, the 49ers are in a position right now where you've got a championship caliber roster, and, trying to develop a quarterback on the job is probably not something really that they're cut out to do right now in terms of where they need to go as a football team. So there were definitely many other teams that had high grades on Trey Lance a couple of years ago coming out of North Dakota State. He was a player who everyone knew it was a projection because he just hadn't played that much, and when he did play, it was against inferior competition in a run-heavy type of an offense. But you would anticipate that there's going to be interest out there. It just comes down to, for the 49ers, can they get enough in terms of a trade where it makes sense for them to move on from him? I mean, again, I think the most logical outcome is Trey Lance being traded. Obviously, they like Brock Purdy a lot. As long as he's healthy, they're committed to him as QB1. Sam Darnold, from the time he got there, has really impressed Kyle and that staff. So he's the number 2. And then they got a guy in Brandon Allen who's played games for a few different teams, and he's got a lot of experience. He's been a great guy in the room the last few years in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. That's kind of the way that your depth chart is set up here. That's not to say that Trey Lance can't be back. I think there's certainly a scenario where he returns to the team, and his absence from practice today was not an indication that it's over right now. It does, though, I think, show, and again, everybody likes Trey as a person. It's got to be hard news to hear when you're the former number 3 overall draft pick, and now suddenly you've gone from the starter to third on the depth chart in a matter of a year.
Is the timing of the news coming out today, 6 days before cutdown day, is that indicative to you that the trade is a much more likely scenario, giving all teams a little bit more lead time to maybe make an offer and make that decision?
Well, certainly. You wouldn't want to hold him past next Tuesday and then try to make the deal, because then you're cutting somebody else to keep him on a temporary basis. I think it's also they've seen enough now through the course of camp that they know, again, they're going to keep Sam and Brandon on the roster in addition to Brock. And so Trey's sort of the odd man out here. So now, yes, you've got 6 days for teams to assess their depth charts. I think, as everybody knows now, the third quarterback rule is back. That may lead to more teams keeping a third quarterback on their roster. And there's a lot of teams out there right now who, if you just look at their depth charts, they don't have a third NFL caliber player right now, just in terms of a guy that you'd want to step in and start games. You always have to go back on the players this close to their draft class to what were the grades the teams had when the player was coming out. Because there's always something, if it's a coach who liked them, or if it's a personnel person who liked them, and they look at the last 2 years where it's just been injuries, he hasn't gotten the reps, he hasn't had the opportunity to do it, who's going to say, you know what, there's enough here, we really like the kid, we can salvage something. At this point, is that a mid-round pick, with some type of conditional upside? It's probably in that area, which I know is a tough pill to swallow, given what the 49ers gave up to go and get Trey Lance, but they also found maybe the franchise quarterback with the Mr. Irrelevant pick, the last pick in the 7th round here. So some of those things balance out. And again, the 49ers are in a spot where they're going for it. They think that they're a Super Bowl caliber team. They do have a really, really good roster. You're moving forward, and Trey Lance, unfortunately for him, is the guy who's kind of been left behind.
Busy day for Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network. You hear him at an airport right now, kind enough to squeeze us in and give us a little perspective here. So, Tom, we really appreciate it. Now, you started to touch on it there. I think this is a question a lot of 49ers fans have right now. Assuming there's a trade, what does it likely look like? Because guys who don't win the QB2 or QB3 job aren't usually very sought after. We understand those first-round grades, but what are the Niners probably looking at here?
I think that, at this point, and I haven't, polled a lot of people within the league, I think that it's going to be kind of a case-by-case basis. Teams are going to look at their depth chart and say, hey, do we have a spot on the 53-man roster to develop a guy who, if we had a high first-round pick a few years ago, we might have considered taking? That's kind of the way that you have to look at it here. It's about, the way that your roster is constructed. And then also, what you thought of the player at the time. That's why even teams that don't have high first-round picks, they still do a level of scouting on all these guys, because you never know what circumstances are going to happen, over the next couple of years, and maybe that player becomes available again. I think that, going back to all the coaches and scouts we talked to about Trey when he was coming out in the draft, the two concerns people had with him were going to be, besides readiness, obviously, because nobody could control that, but it was accuracy. And it was injuries. He came into the league and would have been the two holes. He's been inaccurate. Ball placements remained an issue, and he hasn't frankly been healthy long enough to improve upon that. I mean, listen, the 49ers had no illusions. They knew they weren't taking a finished product here. If they wanted to do that, they would have taken Mac Jones. Trey Lance was the guy with the upside because of the physical skill set that he brought to the table, because they did buy into the makeup, and they thought that if anybody is going to capture their potential here, just in terms of as a person, Trey Lance had all those characteristics, and he still might. I don't think that this is the death knell for Trey Lance. It's just hard when you're taking third-string reps and you haven't been healthy over the last couple of years, and, a team that's, had to put everything into how do we win a Super Bowl right now, they don't really have time to go through that, the normal type of growth process, which, remember, they were willing to do a year ago at this time until he got hurt early on. And then Jimmy Garoppolo came back into the mix. So I do think they can get something for Trey Lance. They're going to have to weigh that out versus the possibility of keeping a fourth quarterback on the roster and maybe making a trade somewhere down the line. Again, the logical conclusion of this is Trey Lance ends up traded, most likely in the next 6 days. Where that is, when that happens, exactly what they get, that's going to depend on where the marketplace shakes out. And the next, 24 to 48 hours, since we reported that this morning, are always the important times. You get a pretty good feel really quickly about what type of interest there is within the league on the guy.
Are you getting any sense of destinations that might have a spot for Trey Lance, or fits in teams that may have that level of patience that you're talking about? Because Trey Lance doesn't have the level of experience to be able to go in and just plug and play in any spot. Any teams that you kind of have your eye on as possible suitors for Trey Lance?
The number one team is the Vikings, because not just that Trey Lance is from Minnesota and he's got family there and he went to North Dakota State, which isn't far away, but also just, Kirk Cousins is in a contract here. The Vikings, even though they've remade that roster through the course of the offseason here, and a lot of those familiar veteran names are gone, they're still a team that went 13-4 last year, and they've got Justin Jefferson, and they've got Cousins, and they've got Neil Hunter. They brought back Harrison Smith. They're not going to win 2 games this year. They're not going to be at the top of the draft to go get Drake May or Caleb Williams. So if you're the Vikings and you're sitting there going, okay, we don't know exactly what direction things are going to go with Kirk. If they win a bunch this year, Kirk plays well, maybe they extend him. Maybe this is not a conversation they end up having to have. But right now, the rest of their depth chart at quarterback is Nick Mullins, who, Nick's been out there. We know what Nick Mullins is. He's probably not your future starter. And then they got Jared Hall, who was a 7th-round pick, did some cool stuff on tape, was hurt throughout his career at BYU. He's a developmental player as well. With Trey Lance, he gets first-round talent. He went number 3 overall. That wasn't by accident. So, buy low type of situation to bring him in and have him slotted as the 3rd guy in the depth chart, let him run the scout team, get him with really good coaches that they've got up there. it would make some sense. I'm sure there's other teams as well, but if you're asking me the fits that make sense to me, that would be number one on the list.
Tom Pelissero, NFL Network, joining us live. He broke the news earlier today that Sam Darnold is the QB2, and the 49ers are exploring all options with regard to Trey Lance's future, and Trey did not practice today. Tom, I wonder if you, in your reporting, have gotten any sense from the Trey Lance camp how they're feeling, right? Like, Trey's been such a good soldier. Nobody really knows. Does he want to be somewhere else? How is he feeling about this situation?
Well, the fact that Trey Lance wasn't on the field today probably gives you a pretty good indication of what this led. And that doesn't mean that, it's a storm out of the building type of situation. But, there's an intense disappointment when, by all accounts, he's made strides through the course of this offseason, and it still wasn't good enough. Takes a day away at this point. He and Sam Darnold have the same agency, CAA. So the writing's been on the wall since they went out and gave Sam Darnold a big upside contract in the offseason. Now that happens with, of course, the backdrop of Brock Purdy, who at the time was facing elbow surgery. There's no certainty he'd be ready for the start of camp here. But the moment that Darnold comes in, and it's somebody that, Darnold's the guy that Kyle's liked for a long time, been intrigued by with his skill set, and then Brock comes back healthy, I think that everybody knew that it was quite possible that it would go this direction. All you can really control if you're a player in that scenario is go out and give your best every day. And Trey Lance did that. He still rode the roller coaster. There still were the accuracy issues, but he really did have a good camp and a good preseason from everybody that I talked to. It's just not enough. I certainly can, empathize with what Trey Lance must be thinking at this point. But, guess what? Sometime in the next week here, he might have a completely fresh start on it with a team that says, we're going to give you the next 6 months here, develop, learn, fit, take the practice squad reps. We're going to give you every opportunity to maybe show you can be a guy down the line.
Got to be refreshing for him if that's the way it goes. But for Kyle Shanahan on the other side, how is he feeling not only in the moment, but in a sense of retrospective, looking back at the draft pick that didn't work out and the fact that you hit on Brock Purdy and now you're in a situation maybe you don't have to talk about this anymore?
Well, Kyle said it himself before, if you had a time machine on any of these drafts, passing on Mahomes and Watson back in 2017, when you go down the list, every team has their hits and their misses. If they were sitting there, if the 49ers had Justin Fields or they had Mac Jones at this point, are they in a vastly different situation? With Fields, you're running a different type of an offense. With Mac, maybe you've got steady play, but, he had a rough 2022 under some challenging circumstances in New England. In other words, there's no perfect scenario, but if there's one thing I know about Kyle, and I haven't talked to him today, I haven't talked to him about this, but I remember years ago him telling me, we were talking about play calling and the hard parts of it, and one thing he said was, everybody gets scars from the things that don't go right. Even if you call the right play and a guy runs the wrong route, or you get the defense, they've never shown before, you played all the percentages and you still got it wrong. What you have to be able to do is the next time you have that opportunity, you can't let your scars take over. You can't let the things that happened to you in the past affect your decision-making going forward. So Trey Lance, again, we'll see how this all shakes out here in the coming weeks, but this is going to be a scar, no doubt about it, for Kyle and for John Lynch and for the 49ers, but you have to move forward. You can't let it affect what you're doing in the future. And going back to the fact that they found Brock Purdy, Kyle's taken a lot of those shots in the late rounds over the years, the mid rounds, CJ Beathard, among others. He's shown he can work with a lot of different quarterbacks. If Brock Purdy ends up being the 49ers quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years, I think that they would take that they would take that trade-off relative to giving up some picks to go up and try to get a guy that didn't work out.
Tom Pelissero, NFL Network. He broke the news on Trey Lance today. Niners exploring all options. Tom, just one more on this end, and it's this. Is the relationship fractured? Because earlier in this conversation, you said there is still a scenario where a trade partner is not found. Is it within the realm of possibility that Trey Lance is still on this team this year?
It's within the realm of possibility, sure. Sam Darnold's on a 1-year contract. Brock Purdy, still haven't seen, in terms of regular season game action coming off of the elbow. And Trey Lance is still 22 years old. He's still a young player that, has a lot of things that they like about him. So if they don't get, I don't see them putting this way. I don't see them flipping them for a conditional 7th in 2025. Okay, it's got to be a real offer that makes sense for them. They get value, and Trey gets the opportunity to go someplace else. If they don't get that, maybe you hold on to them. Maybe you do carry 4 quarterbacks, or you do the release and re-sign to the practice squad with Brandon Allen down the stretch. I think that Brandon Allen's going to be on the 53 come next Tuesday, but there's different things you can do now with the new practice squad rules. Maybe you hold him into the season. I don't think that, by any stretch we're saying that next Tuesday is a hard cutoff here, but certainly, if the red light is on for the rest of the league, hey, we got a situation here. A guy that you had really high up your draft boards a few years ago is now available. Do you want him? If so, let's see your best offers, and let's go from there.
Fascinating and great work, Tom. And by the way, while you're sort of talking about that relationship between the two sides, what can you share with regard to how the communication was between those two sides? In other words, has everybody been aware of what's taking place, or do you think Trey Lance found out from your tweet today?
No, definitely not. Trey Lance knew. Sam Darnold had been told that he was going to be the number 2. There was communication. Again, I'll let Kyle and those guys talk on exactly what happened today, but everyone knew, everyone was on board with Trey not being there today. No, I don't think it's an issue with the relationship, and Trey's not that type of guy. I'm sure he's disappointed and frustrated and all those things, but it's not not a bleep you type of situation from everything that I understand. The 49ers do a good job of that. Kyle does a really good job of that. I don't anticipate that being an issue.
Tom, great stuff, man. Thank you.
You got it, guys.
Okay, Tom Pelissero, NFL Network. He broke the news today. Sam Darnold is QB2. All options on the table for Trey Lance, who was not at practice today.